Hi everyone. First, let me thank all of you who have been with me during this very, very sad and painful time following the death of my mother. And I certainly appreciate all the love and support and kindness and friendship that I've received and continue to receive, and I'm very, very grateful. You know, for many, many years I've thought that it was time to once again teach about the Jewish way in mourning. And I've decided to try something a little bit different. Instead of having a class here in synagogue, I'm going to do this through our YouTube channel. I'm going to do a whole series of talks about mourning, the process of mourning, rituals, traditions, and in some way you're going to follow me through my mourning for my mother, and I'm hopeful that some of what I'm going to share with you in this class is going to perhaps answer questions that you might have, one day will have, unfortunately. But I know that our tradition is so rich, so unbelievably rich, with rituals and traditions which are there to guide us through the valley of the shadow of death, as we call it. So let's start at the beginning, the very, very shocking, painful, sad beginning of when mourning begins, when we learn of the death of a loved one. I think everyone who has been in that place knows how painful it is. We know the despair, we know the sadness, we know what it feels like to be crushed by that news. We know that even though we may have understood that the time was coming, as we all appreciate, you're never really prepared. You can't be. It's impossible to be prepared for the death of a loved one. Absolutely impossible. So Judaism shares with us the way in which we are going to respond to that moment and all the moments of mourning which follows. From the time of death to the time of burial, which in the Jewish tradition is supposed to be as compressed as possible, we take on the status of what is called being an onain. We're an onain. We're not a mourner, but we are preparing for the burial. And at the same time, our tradition says we ought to be focused on our own feelings. I know people, after the death of a loved one, I hear, well, we've got to go shopping for the Shiva, we've got to prepare for people coming over, and I understand the practicalities of preparing for a Shiva, but being an onain, being in that time period, our tradition says to us, be respectful of your feelings. Allow yourself to feel. Give yourself, whether it's a day or a day and a half, just to reflect on the loss that you've suffered. Give yourself the dignity of time so that you can, in a sense, be in touch with your own feelings and not try to cover over the magnitude of the loss. The tradition is so kind and understanding that it tells us that during this period of being an onain, we're not even obligated to pray. So that if there's a minyan, you don't have to come. Not only don't you have to come, you shouldn't come. And if you do come, you're not counted because you're not obligated to pray. The Jewish tradition is saying that you deserve that time just to be with yourself, to begin to work through the feelings and not rush through them. The tradition is saying that you're so busy involved in preparing for the funeral that all the other mitzvot are just not that important at that moment. Death overrides everything about the rest of life. So death comes, we are an onaim. And the tradition says to us, give yourself time, because you're going to need it. You're going to need it. We call a funeral chapel, and we ask them to come to take our loved one. Take our loved one to the chapel. And I want you to know that once that happens, there is a very specific ritual that the Jewish tradition enshrines in a very, very special way. We have a belief that our loved ones, once they have passed away, should never, ever be left alone until the time of the funeral service. That's right. There is someone, we call that person a shomer, which means a watcher.